Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Adventurers Guild. And today we're going to begin the first episode in a series of 3 parts covering the werewolves and dogmen in Wisconsin. There's so many locations, so many accounts that I've got to cut it up into 3 videos. First up on our list of many places and accounts is in Jefferson, Wisconsin. And just outside of the town limits is a Franciscan convent, St. Coletta. And here they help to take care of the mentally deficient and the mentally challenged, and they help them to gain life skills to go out into life and live as normal a life as possible. Mark Shackleford, a former boxer, was hired by the Institute to patrol the grounds as a watchman. And one night while on his rounds, he went behind the main building. And behind the main building, there's several Indian mounds that the Institute had left undisturbed. So as Mark was passing by that area, he heard this scratching noise and a lot of commotion. So he shines the light over at the burial mounds. And when he did, it eliminated this large wolf-like creature digging into the mound. However, when the light hit it, it stopped and it stood up and it turned around and it faced Mark. Now, Mark recalls that it had 3 really long middle fingers, and then the thumb and the pinky were kind of withered compared to the 3 middle fingers. However, all 5 of the fingers had large claws on them. The thing stood up, it looked at him, and then it bolted off cowardly into the woods. Now, Mark was unsure if what he saw really happened or not. He just couldn't believe what he beheld with his eyes. So the next day, he drove out to the Institute during daylight hours, and he went out to the mound and investigated it. And sure enough, there were claw marks all over in the mound. So now Mark knows what he saw was real. Now later on that day, he was on patrol at night again, and around midnight, he decided to go back out to the mounds and see if this thing was out there. So as he's going by, he shines his light, and sure enough, there's this thing. So it stood up and faced Mark. This time it didn't run, and Mark recalls it was about 6 foot tall. He described it as dark to black fur covering a muscular human form, large fangs, pointy ears on top of its head, a snout that made it much more of a canine than ape in appearance, no tail, and it smelled of rotting meat. It was also coming towards Mark a little bit. It was getting very aggressive and growling. And it uttered a word, Gardara, as it growled it out. And then it began to growl more and more. It was getting more heavy, more excited, and it really seemed like this thing was about to attack Mark. So he did the only thing in his power that he could do. He prayed. The prayer worked. The thing stopped where it was at. However, when Mark finished and he looked at it, it gave him this look of disgust. It just sneered at him. And then it turned around and walked slowly off into the woods. Mark never saw this thing again. Mark only confided into his wife about this until 1958, when he confided in his son, Joe Shackleford, about the whole story. And when Joe asked him, do you think this thing was supernatural or do you think it was an animal? Mark simply replied, the damn thing came from hell. Now, St. Coletta is divided into 2 areas. There's the main campus, and then up north there's another little section. Both existed at the time, and we're not sure behind which of these areas it took place. The main campus itself is completely filled with empty buildings. No one uses it anymore. It's not exactly abandoned, but there's just no one there. So if you want to drive by and look at these places, here's the address to both institutes. However, before walking on the land, make sure to get permission. Don't just help yourself. Give them a call. Hey guys, be sure to hit that like button if you're enjoying this episode. And now, let's continue on with these stories. Just 26 miles south of Jefferson and St. Coletta is the town of Delavan. And in 1964, a California native had just moved to the town, and his name was Dennis George Fewless. Dennis purchased a house on Highway M, and he got a job 20 miles south across the Illinois border in the town of Harvard. One night on his way back home, Dennis was driving up Highway 89, and he originally stated that he turned left heading home. However, Highway M is to the right, so most likely Dennis actually turned right. At any rate, as Dennis turned the corner of R&D Town Line Road, his headlights illuminated a massive, hairy humanoid creature. It came running from the north, and it turned its back to him and started running down the road about 300 feet. And here's how Dennis described what he saw. The being was around 7 foot or taller. It was covered in dark brown fur, had very long arms, weighed over 400 pounds, had human-looking hands and feet. However, Dennis gave no description of its face or its ears. Dennis followed it for the 300 feet, and as it was running, it leaned forward with its chest, and it was swinging its arms. It abruptly turned right and leaped over a 3.5-foot barbed wire fence with ease and began running south. The description given by Dennis about the creature's feet make it sound like it was more likely a Bigfoot rather than a werewolf or a dogman. In fact, later on, Dennis even said that to him it appeared to be some sort of an ape. This all happened about 3/4 of a mile southwest of Dennis's home. About halfway between the home of Dennis and St. Coletta is the town of Whitewater, and running east out of the town is Bluff Road. And numerous people in the 1970s encountered some sort of hairy being on this road. He became known as the Bluff Man. Now, there's no description whether he was more ape or canine looking. However, with all the stories that take place in the area, I would assume this to be one of the werewolf or dogman sightings. Now, Bluff Road terminated just west, slightly west of East Troy. And the people in East Troy were also having troubles in the 1970s. As couples were going out, parking out in the backwoods to make out, their vehicles were being attacked or things were coming around their vehicles, and they named this hairy entity the Eddy. Because of how close both of these places are to each other, we would assume it was the same creature in the 1970s. Back up to St. Coletta and just 2 miles southeast, DNR agent David Jetson was called out to a farm. This lady had said that she kept seeing this big, huge, black, hairy thing walking the tree line near her farm, and it was starting to worry her quite a bit. And Jetson took this seriously, and he went out and he investigated the whole area. He found no evidence of anything being there, and he said just to call him if any problems arose. 2 weeks later, this lady frantically calls the sheriffs and tells them someone's trying to break into her home. Meanwhile, when she looks out the window, she sees that massive hairy thing on her porch rattling her door. When the sheriffs arrived, it had fled and ran away. However, when they looked at the door, 7 feet up above the door was a massive slash gouged into the wood. The police checked the property, there was nothing there, and they left for the night. However, this thing returned and went into her barn. It attacked her horse and left a 30-inch gash across the horse's chest. The next morning, Agent Jetson came back out to the farm. He investigated the slash, and it was definitely a claw-inflicted gash. It wasn't from a man-made instrument or the horse scratching itself on a post or anything like that. It was absolutely animal-made. So then Jetson began to investigate the yard. He looked around and he found 12-inch tracks cutting through her garden. However, the thing never returned to the farm after this event. If you're enjoying this video, be sure to click on the subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner. It helps me out more than you could ever know. And now, let's get back to the stories. "24 miles southeast of Coletta is the farm of Scott Bray. And Scott lives just outside of the city, Elkhorn, Wisconsin, on the famous Bray Road, where numerous werewolf and dogman sightings have taken place. The year was 1989, and Scott was out in his field during daylight hours when he saw this beast on 4 legs cutting across his land. Here's how Scott described the beast. It was black with some gray fur. It was much taller than a German Shepherd and super bulky up front. In fact, the way he described it, it kind of sounded like a massive Russian boar. Scott was amazed at the thing and began to follow it. And as he's going along, he found these massive paw prints in the ground. This thing started heading towards some stones, and when it got to it, it disappeared. He couldn't find the thing anywhere. This thing that Scott had witnessed will be seen so many times, witnessed by so many people, that this thing becomes dubbed the Beast of Bray Road. If you'd like to drive by and tour the field from your car where Scott Bray saw this beast, I'll leave the coordinates in the comments down below. But remember, don't trespass on his farm or bother any residents mentioned in this video. Around the same time, a gentleman living in Elkhorn named Russell Guest had gone out into the country not far from Bray Road. And while he was out there, he heard this rustling in the bushes about 300 feet away from him. And so he looks over and he sees this massive canine thing come out of the bushes, and it stands up on its hind legs and looks at him. And Russell turns his back and he runs for his life. And as he's running, he turns back and he looks over and he sees the thing is on its 4 legs. This is how Russell described what he saw. It had a massive canine head, black fur with gray, with a wide neck and shoulders, but only stood about 5 foot tall. As Russell was running for his life, he looked over his shoulders and he noticed the thing wasn't chasing him. It had dropped onto all 4s and was actually wandering off towards Bray Road. He did note that when it was on all 4s, it was much taller than any dog he had ever seen in his life. The last sighting we're going to talk about tonight took place also on Bray Road, and it was a lady named Lorianne Andresi, and her sighting took place almost exactly the same time as Scott and Russell's. As she was driving home from work one night, she rounded one of the few turns in Bray Road, and her headlights illuminated somebody kneeling on the side of the road. And she pulled up beside them and stopped her car for about 45 seconds. They were only about 6 feet away from her, just outside the passenger window. And when she looked over, it was not a person. And this is what she saw. It had grayish-brown fur, a wolf snout with large fangs, pointed ears, yellow eyes that seemed to have a slight glow to them. It was very muscular and had arms jointed like a human. It had human-like fingers with long claws and was holding something in its hands that it appeared to be eating. She noted the way the palms were turned up as it held whatever it was eating was unlike any animal. She estimated it to be around 5'7" and weighing about 150 pounds. The next day, Lori went directly to the library and to the Animal Control Center to see if she could get any answers to what in the world she had witnessed. This drawing was made of Lori's description of what she had encountered on Bray Road. Alright guys, that's going to end this episode of a 3-part series. Be sure to subscribe because I'm going to reveal one of the locations of the most highly sought after Dogmen and werewolf hunting grounds in all of Wisconsin. That's going to do it for this episode. Be sure to click on that logo to subscribe or watch one of these videos. And until next time, we're off on another adventure. God bless.